Hey everybody, my name is Shibby. I'm an esports colorcaster and Celestial ranked player in Marvel Rivals. And in today's video, I want to talk about some of the reasons why I think the player base count is dropping so drastically in this game. Now, I'm not going to be like other creators and tell you that Marvel Rivals is dying or dead, because I just fundamentally don't agree with that, nor do I think that's true. But I think it's very hard to ignore that the player base count has been dropping for the past 8 months, and I think I can sum those up into 3 big reasons. I don't want to keep you waiting any longer, so let's just get into it. One of the big reasons as to why I think the Marvel Rivals player base has been dropping so drastically is that we have just had a very stale patch cycle. And a stale patch cycle will lead to a stale game, and nobody wants to come back to a stale game. I'm going to go all the way back to Season 2 when Emma Frost released. And no, this is not an Emma Frost hate video or anything like that. I've already released a video on my thoughts about Emma Frost and why I think she's problematic to Marvel Rivals and the tank role in general. So if you want to go see that, go check that out. But Emma Frost and Magneto, since Season 2, have been the best tanks in the game, bar none. Emma is obviously not solely to blame, but it's relevant when she's been one of the most banned tanks since Season 2.5 and is the #1 most banned tank in Season 3 and 3.5. Magneto as well has been a top 2 pick since Season 1. He has not dropped below top 2. He has always been relevant, has always been able to be paired with pretty much any hero in the tank or Vanguard pool. Now, obviously, we have seen metas where certain tanks have been more viable, right? Doctor Strange, Venom, Captain America, Thing, all this stuff, but rarely did you ever see those heroes not paired up with one of Emma or Mag unless those two were banned out. Now, I will move on to the duelists and say that I feel like the duelists suffer the least from like stale patches because their roster is just so jam-packed with heroes, but there's always a clear-cut top shelf kind of pick of the litter when it comes to the duelists, right? Pretty much since Season 2.5, Human Torch, Hela, Phoenix, Wolverine, Psylocke have all been relatively dominant in their own ways and have been the fallback, like these are the best heroes to pick if you are a duelist, if you're a DPS and you don't really know where to go. Even if you're coming back, let's say you took a break in Season 2.5 and you came back in 3.5, all these heroes minus Phoenix, who you probably wouldn't know, are still meta, are still very good. I do think the less popular or fringe picks can work, but that's more relevant in the lower elos. I would argue Diamond, potentially even GM and lower, where stuff like Scarlet Witch, Moon Knight, Squirrel Girl are much more viable. But if you are looking to climb, if you are looking to, really min-max your ability and your influence as a duelist, you go to any guide, you go to any creator, you just look at what the top people are playing, you'll see those heroes that I mentioned, right? Torch, Hela, Phoenix, Wolverine, Psylocke. And I think it's really damning when you have a hero so polarizing like Wolverine, who has just been in permaban jail since Season 1, right? Since everybody figured him out and understood how to play him, he has just been a menace, and Netties have kind of just pushed him aside and said, you either ban him or your Vanguard suffers, right? And the fact that they aren't really addressing him, they haven't really reworked him. They tried to tap him down here and there, but I just think the fact they've been so reluctant to actually make any big sweeping changes to him kind of shows what I mean when I talk about a stale patch cycle. They also kind of have this similar issue with Black Panther. Not that I think Black Panther's OP, but I do think he is very frustrating for a lot of the heroes, a lot of the player base to play against. And again, they've kind of pushed him to the side while tapping him down very slightly and said, you either learn how to play against him or he just takes up a ban slot in like Grandmaster and below. Supports, I think, suffer the second most because Loki, Luna, and Cloak and Dagger have been the holy trinity of supports for a while now. I'm going to say since Season 0, I'll argue, they have been the holy trinity of supports. Even with Invisible Woman coming in, the Rocket changes, the Mantis changes, they are very clearly a cut above those guys, right? You have the Loki, Luna, Cloak tier, a pretty massive gap. Then you have Invisible Woman, Rocket, and even Mantis you can throw in there. And then you've got the worst of the worst, the bottom tier, supports that essentially rely on 3 support compositions, right? Ultron, Adam, Jeff, even with the buffs that came to Adam recently. Like, I feel like NetEase has kind of categorized supports in that way, where you have these big sweeping AoE guys like Loki, Luna, Cloak. Then you've got some of the more fringe stuff that can kind of compete, like Mantis and Rocket, even though Mantis and Rocket are AoE ults in a sense, right? Then you've got Ultron, Adam, and Jeff, who just kind of have their own niches have their own weird player bases. They don't actually try to push them into the forefront of the meta very drastically, right? Adam being the only one, I think, in my mind, that got a very significant change with his res, but still needs support in functioning in those 3 support compositions. It feels like Marvel Rivals very rarely tries to force multiple heroes into the meta with their patches. Their patch cycles, in my opinion, tend to err on the side of safety rather than excitement, which I just think is the wrong approach when you have a game like Marvel Rivals who have all these exciting characters and all these different IPs, and you're kind of just playing it safe by keeping the same popular characters in the meta for a while. One thing I commend a game like League of Legends that has been out for like 16 years now, what they do is that for the most part, they try to make their game relatively fresh with their patch cycles. And granted, their patch cycles are every 2 weeks, which is much faster than Marvel Rivals. And during their big international tournaments, they are less hectic with what they change. But for 80 to almost 90% of the year, when there aren't any international tournaments or anything happening, they will forcibly buff and nerf their roster to push things that they want to see in and out of the meta, sometimes fundamentally changing how a character functions or even changing their main role, right? They will turn mages or mid laners into junglers. They'll turn top laners into junglers. They'll turn supports into mid laners or mid laners into supports. They do all this stuff. A 16-year-old game does not stay popular, in my opinion, in the modern age without keeping the game fresh. No, Super Smash Bros. Melee, you are the exception, not the rule. And if Marvel Rivals continues this kind of safety of patching, and they err on the side of safety, and they're not trying to force stuff like Black Widow, Moon Knight, Scarlet Witch, whatever, right? Easier heroes, harder heroes into the meta, and they're going to keep stuff like Psylocke strong. They're going to keep stuff like Human Torch, Phoenix, Hela, all these heroes strong. I don't think it's going to work out, right? They don't even try to do that with the tank or the support role, really. The one, maybe 2 times I can really think of where they kind of made a deliberate change and said, hey, we want you to play this hero, was when the Punisher changes came out. And that was a result of them, removing infinite ammo from him. So he needed those compensation buffs. So his damage was increased, his mag size was increased, his spread was decreased, right? They did all these changes and they said, hey, you can pick Punisher now as a viable hit scan hero. You don't only have to play Hela anymore. And that was the one big forcible change I can really, truly think of when they wanted to say, hey, this hero, you want to play him right now. They kind of did that with the Iron Fist changes, but then they quickly reverted that because a lot of people didn't like that. So it's not that they don't listen to the community. It's not that they don't understand the community, but I feel like we aren't hammering in the idea that we want you to be exciting. We want you to be, hectic with these patch cycles, because if you just keep the same stuff strong, if you keep the game the same, nobody's really gonna want to come back to it. I think another factor in why players don't want to come back to Marvel Rivals is that the hero releases haven't really given them a reason to come back. Hero releases post Fantastic Four have been more missed than hits. I would say Emma, when released in Season 2, was immensely fun for Vanguard players and players that don't even play Vanguard. She had really interesting mechanics, she was a high DPS Vanguard, and she had other features of her design well liked by the community. She then became one of the most polarizing tanks in the game. It was really interesting because you kind of find yourself on one of 2 sides. You either think Emma and tanks like that should be OP and that she's fun for the game and that more tanks should be risen to Emma's level. Or you're on the other side and you think Emma has been dominant for too long and you think that her design is problematic both for Marvel Rivals and the tank class in general. It's safe to say that Ultron, Phoenix, and Blade all flopped for different reasons, but I particularly want to focus on both Phoenix and Blade because I think those 2 are the most interesting. Phoenix is a top tier pick, but her popularity only starts at matching that status in Celestial Plus. Every other rank, she doesn't even crack top 5 in the pick rate. Her gameplay loop and overall ability set is not really that fun or engaging. Her and Hela share very similar kits, with Phoenix overall being a better version, as we've been able to identify with Pro Play and High Elo. She's a very vanilla hit scan hero with a semi-interesting ult mechanic. Now you can blame the fact that because she's a hit scan hero, the barrier to entry on that is going to be a lot higher, and so you're not going to see a lot of players pick up that character because she's so hard to play, because she requires precise aim. But Hela didn't really suffer some of those same issues, at least in the early seasons. I feel like Marvel Rivals created a good hero with very little marketing and hype, which is reflected in the popularity and the pick rate of this hero. Not a lot of marketing went into actually bringing Phoenix into Marvel Rivals. And granted, Jean Grey, or Phoenix, however you want to refer to her, is arguably one of the most popular X-Men in the X-Men series and the X-Men comics. She's also one of the most strongest heroes within the overall Marvel universe, not counting like the gods and the Celestials and all that stuff, but Phoenix as an entity is very, very powerful, and a lot of people understand how powerful she can be. I just feel like NetEase and Marvel Rivals in general didn't really deliver on that fact. Blade, I think, suffers from the exact opposite issue as Phoenix. He was a relatively well-marketed hero. We got to see the first teasers of him underground in Central Park. We then got to see him sleeping in Wakanda, further building upon the hype and the anticipation of when Blade wakes up and when he arrives into the Marvel Rivals universe. I also think Blade really benefited from the fact that he has almost a cult-like following and kind of embodies what it is to be a Marvel hero in terms of how cool he is, right? His design, shades, trench coat. He's a vampire hunter that is half vampire. Vampires inherently are very cool, just in general. So he had a lot going for him, both intrinsically as a Marvel character, but also what NetEase did to supplement a lot of that and build upon the excitement of the greater Marvel Rivals player base, as well as just the greater Marvel fan base. But when it came time to actually execute, when Blade actually dropped, he released and he sucked. There is no better way to put it. You could see all the different content creators, all the different people that when they got their hands on Blade, whether it was in the PBE or when it was in the actual release of the game, everybody came to the same conclusion that this hero sucks. His gameplay loop is cool, right? The abilities he has, his switching from gun to blade, all that kind of stuff. His design is very cool, but the execution lackluster. And when you release a hero that you have built so much hype for, that the community has built so much hype for, when you release a hero like that in the state of him sucking on release, yeah, I can see why your player base might not want to come back when a hero of theirs is getting into Marvel Rivals, because you failed to execute on Blade, because you failed to live up to the expectations. You could have just released a hero that would have been OP or slightly stronger than the rest of the duelists, and that would have been fine. I don't think anyone would have blamed you. That is a common strategy that a lot of other games that have heroes or champions or whatever, that's what they do on release. They release them in a slightly OP state and then tone down afterwards. This kind of feeds into what I talk about where they have this like safe patch cycle. It now bleeds into how your heroes get released and adjusted. And when you kind of break some of that goodwill and trust that a lot of the community had with you, where they wanted you to release Blade and they wanted to have fun with the hero, but when they're losing on him, nobody likes it when they're losing on a hero. Doesn't mean anything if you are the most popular hero in Marvel Rivals. If you are consistently losing on it, it will take away your enjoyment of the game. The final reason as to why I think players aren't coming back excited to play Marvel Rivals is just more of an overarching issue of the marketing and hype that Marvel Rivals kind of fails to create around a lot of its heroes and around its game. Marketing for the game in regards to their heroes post Fantastic Four have been lackluster. I did praise their marketing execution around Blade, but I think that was also partially fueled by the fact that Blade inherently has a fan base that loves that hero, and also Blade in general, there's been just a giant starvation for him as a hero, right? They want to see him in more stuff, they want to see him in more games, animation, everything. So I think there was just a very big hunger for Blade. The Fantastic Four succeeded because it was not just NetEase doing the marketing, but Marvel as a whole with the movie releasing. It was nearly impossible to ignore the Fantastic Four, even if you consumed a modicum of Marvel content. Whether you were on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, or even just out and about in the world, you could not ignore that the Fantastic Four was coming into the greater media landscape, whether it was in Marvel Rivals or the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Fantastic Four also had the luxury of being the first new heroes to be released after the full launch of the game, so that gave them the extra hype of like, oh, we get new stuff after the full roster, and it's 4 heroes, 2 in each essentially half patch or half season. In comparison, Ultron, Emma, Phoenix just got very little marketing or hype around them relative to what Fantastic Four and even Blade received. This may be because of the hero release schedule that they talked about, where they are releasing a hero a month. They might not have the time and the resources that were originally dedicated to the Fantastic Four and potentially Blade because of these time constraints. I think it's very hard to tease a hero when they are likely releasing in 3 to 6 weeks, and then another hero is releasing in about 3 to 6 weeks. It's hard to build the hype campaign around them, but they only have themselves to blame in my mind. Ultimately, it's hard to ignore Marvel Rivals and the issues that I raised. The player base clearly reflects that. This is not to say that NetEase can't turn things around. The game is only 8 months old. We know what Marvel Rivals is capable of. They will listen to their community, as they've shown time and time again. I think Season 4 really needs to hit on at least some of the issues I've talked about. Things like a fresh patch that shows new heroes and team-ups coming in can do so much more than they probably realize. The game will obviously get a bump in player base when Season 4 drops. That's a given. But the real test is whether they can maintain the attention of those same players 2 weeks later. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications, as that all helps me out a ton. I try and respond to every single one of the comments in my videos because I generally do appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules to leave one, as well as I love interacting with my own community. If you want to see more of my content, I stream over on Twitch about 3 to 4 times a week, starting around 7 p.m. PST. Over there, you'll get unedited versions of my videos, as well as we go over gameplay reviews, patch notes, and you guys can ask questions in the chat, and I respond pretty quickly. If you care more for short form content, I upload daily on both YouTube Shorts and TikTok. Over there, you'll get condensed versions of my videos, as well as stream highlights and my general thoughts on the game. All of that will be in the description box below, as well as a pop-up that will show up on the right side of the screen here, telling you where to go and all my handles. I really do appreciate all of you, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.